Chapter 1. The Birth of a Sorceress. In the heart of a dark and ancient forest, where the trees whispered secrets older than time itself, a girl was born. Her name was Seraphina, and from the moment she took her first breath, the world around her seemed to change. Her mother, a woman of great beauty and mysterious origins, had always been known to the villagers as a healer. They came to her seeking remedies for their ailments, but they whispered among themselves about her strange ways and the power that seemed to emanate from her very being. Seraphina's father was a traveler, a man whose past was cloaked in shadows. He never spoke of his homeland or his family, and when he left without a trace. But he left behind something precious, his daughter. Seraphina grew up with a knowledge of both the seen and the unseen, learning not just the herbs and potions her mother used to heal, but also the arcane arts her mother had practiced in secret. Her mother had always been kind to her, but there was a coldness in her eyes that Seraphina could never quite understand. One night, as the full moon bathed the forest in its pale light, her mother sat her down in the quiet of their cottage and spoke of things Seraphina had never heard before. "You are destined for greatness, my child," her mother began, her voice low and deliberate. "But that greatness will come with a price. You have a power inside you, a power that can sway hearts, bend minds, and command those who cross your path. It is a power that can either destroy you or elevate you beyond the reach of mere mortals." Seraphina's eyes widened with curiosity. "What power do you speak of, mother?" Her mother smiled softly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "It is the power of a lure, the gift of the serpent. With it, you can captivate the minds of men, lead them into your grasp, and make them do your bidding. But be warned, the serpent's gift is both a blessing and a curse. It can give you what you want, but it will also take something from you in return." Seraphina listened carefully, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Her mother continued, "The serpent's magic is ancient. It is not taught in any school or temple. It is passed down through bloodlines, hidden in shadows, and whispered through the winds. The power is in your blood, Seraphina. It is a gift, but it is also a curse." For weeks, Seraphina trained with her mother, learning the secrets of the serpentine magic that had been passed down through generations. The first lesson was simple: how to control the gaze. Her mother taught her how to look into a man's eyes and make him feel as though he were the only person in the world. She showed her how to twist her voice into melodies that would make a man's heart race and his thoughts cloud with desire. But there was a darker side to the magic, one that Seraphina was not fully prepared for. Her mother took her to the deepest part of the forest, to a hidden clearing where a massive serpent lay coiled around an ancient stone. The serpent's eyes glowed like molten gold, and as Seraphina approached, she felt its power surge through her veins. "This is the heart of the serpent's magic," her mother explained. "The serpent is not just a creature of flesh. It is a creature of energy, of spirit. You must learn to connect with it, to become one with it. Only then will you unlock the full potential of your power." Seraphina stood before the serpent, feeling the pull of its ancient magic. The moment she locked eyes with it, she felt a rush of power like nothing she had ever experienced. Her senses sharpened, and the world around her seemed to bend to her will. She could hear the whispers of the forest, the heartbeat of the earth itself. Her mother watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. "You have taken your first step, my daughter, but remember, the serpent does not give its power freely. It will ask for something in return, always." As the years passed, Seraphina honed her skills. She learned to wield her beauty and charm as tools of manipulation, bending the will of those around her. Men came to her, drawn to her like moths to a flame, unable to resist the magnetic pull of her presence. She used them, shaped them, and left them broken when they no longer served her purpose. Her reputation grew, and soon she was known far and wide as a woman who could make any man fall in love with her, only to discard him when she had taken all she needed. But the more she used her powers, the more she began to feel a gnawing emptiness inside her. She could control men, bend them to her will, but in the process she was losing something vital, something that no amount of magic could replace. One evening, as Seraphina gazed into the still waters of a quiet lake, she realized the truth. She was not just using men. She was using the serpent's magic to fill a void within herself, a void that had been growing ever since her father had disappeared. Her heart had become as cold and unfeeling as the serpent that had granted her power. It was then that Seraphina made a decision. She would use her power to its fullest, embracing the darkness that had begun to take root in her soul. She would become not just a mistress of men's hearts, but the queen of their desires. She would let the serpent's magic consume her, knowing that there was no turning back. And so, Seraphina the enchantress was born, a woman of beauty, power, and dangerous allure, whose spell would never be broken. The serpent's gift had been given, and she would use it to shape the world in her image, one man at a time. Chapter 2. The Serpent's Charm. As Seraphina embraced the full extent of her power, her beauty became more than just a physical trait. It was a weapon. She had learned to weave her presence into every room she entered, to become an irresistible force that no man could ignore. Her gaze alone could paralyze a man, making him feel as though he were the only one in her world. Her voice, smooth as silk, could make him forget everything but her. But it was her serpent's cane, the dark symbol of her magic, that gave her complete control. In the cities that sprawled far from the forest where she had been raised, Seraphina became a legend. Whispers of her charm and power spread like wildfire. Men from all walks of life sought her out, from the humble farmers to the richest lords. Each came with a different desire, but they all shared the same fate. They were all drawn to her, helpless before the force of her spell. Seraphina played with them like a master puppeteer, her silver tongue weaving promises of love and devotion, only to leave them shattered once she had extracted what she needed. She never gave them her heart, for she had none to offer. The serpent had consumed it long ago. In its place, there was only power, and it felt intoxicating. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the bustling market square, Seraphina walked among the crowds, her dark gown shimmering with golden accents. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and the chatter of merchants peddling their wares. But to Seraphina, the world seemed to slow around her as her eyes locked onto a figure standing by a fruit stall. He was a tall man, dressed in fine clothes, with sharp features and a confident posture. His gaze met hers, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. He smiled, a smile that was both knowing and intrigued. "You are the one they speak of," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "The one who makes men fall at her feet." Seraphina felt a stir in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation. It was not the usual feeling of power she had over men. This man, this stranger, was different. He was not afraid of her. He was not awestruck by her beauty or her charm. Instead, he seemed to see right through her, as though he knew the darkness that lay beneath her seductive exterior. "You are bold, but foolish," Seraphina said, her voice cold and calculating. "Few have the audacity to speak so plainly to me." The man chuckled, a low, almost dangerous sound. "I don't fear you, Seraphina. I see the serpent in your eyes, but I also see the woman beneath it, and I wonder—" He paused, studying her intently. "What is it you truly desire?" Seraphina's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever asked her that question before. She had always been the one to take what she wanted, to manipulate others to fulfill her needs. But now, for the first time, she found herself questioning her own desires. The serpent's magic had always been enough to guide her, to fill the emptiness within her. But this man, this stranger, was stirring something deeper, something she had long buried. "Desire?" she repeated, her voice quieter now, almost thoughtful. "What I desire is simple. Power. Control." The man's smile widened, but his eyes were sharp, full of an understanding that unsettled her. "Power over others, perhaps. But do you have power over yourself, Seraphina? Can you control the darkness that you wield so carelessly?" Seraphina felt a sudden anger rise within her, but she controlled it, letting her serpent's magic flow through her. She raised her cane, the serpent's head gleaming in the fading light. "You will regret underestimating me," she warned, her voice low and commanding. But the man did not back away. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence unnervingly calm. "I don't underestimate you," he said softly. "I simply recognize that you are lost. You've taken everything from others, but what have you given yourself?" Seraphina's grip on her cane tightened, and for a moment she considered using her magic to put him under her control. But something held her back, something in his eyes, something that resonated deep within her. "You think you know me," she said sharply, "but you don't. No one does." The man's gaze softened, and he stepped back, giving her space. "No, I don't. But I would like to, if you let me." Seraphina's heart raced, and for the first time in years, she felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. It was as though the serpent's magic, which had always been her ally, was now at war with something else, something buried deep within her. She looked at the man, her emotions swirling, uncertain of what to do next. "You are dangerous," she said finally, her voice quiet. "And you are not like the others." He smiled, that same knowing smile. "I am no more dangerous than you, Seraphina. But I am not here to take anything from you. I simply want to know you." Seraphina stood there, staring at him, torn between the desire to use her magic to ensnare him and the strange pull she felt towards him. It was a feeling she had not known in years, a feeling of vulnerability. But before she could respond, a distant cry echoed through the market. It was a familiar sound, one that sent a chill down her spine. A man had fallen victim to her magic. Yet again, Seraphina turned her back on the man, walking swiftly toward the source of the commotion, her mind still racing. She could not afford to let her guard down. Not now, not ever. The serpent's magic was her strength, and she would use it to keep control, to keep her distance from the things that threatened her power. But even as she walked away, she could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Something had shifted within her. And for the first time, she wondered if it was the serpent's magic that truly controlled her, or if it was something else entirely. Chapter 3. The Price of Power. As days turned into weeks, the unsettling encounter with the stranger haunted Seraphina. His words echoed in her mind, and no matter how much she tried to drown them out with the intoxicating effects of her magic, they lingered like a shadow at the edge of her thoughts. Do you have power over yourself? The question replayed in her mind, gnawing at her soul. For the first time, she began to question the very foundation of her existence, the allure, the control, and the darkness that had always defined her. Seraphina's magic had always been her most faithful companion, but now, with every spell she cast, a piece of herself seemed to slip away, as though the serpent's power was drawing her further into its abyss. She had always believed that controlling men and using them to her will was a game, one she could play indefinitely. But now, with the stranger's challenge hanging over her, she felt as though the game was slipping out of her grasp. One night, as she walked through the forest near her cottage, her thoughts weighed heavily on her heart. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light filtering through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and leaves. Seraphina paused, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of her serpent-headed cane, seeking solace in its familiar touch. But tonight it felt colder than usual. Its warmth, the warmth she had always relied on, was gone. As she walked deeper into the forest, a soft rustling sound caught her attention. She turned, and there he was, the man who had unsettled her so. His presence was like a calm breeze in the midst of a storm, an anchor in a world that was spinning out of control. "You," Seraphina said, her voice a mixture of surprise and frustration. "What are you doing here?" The man stepped forward, his eyes meeting hers with a steady gaze that seemed to pierce through her defenses. "I told you that I would not leave you alone, Seraphina. I see the struggle within you, and I want to help you find what you've lost." Seraphina's heart raced, but she quickly masked it with a cold smile. "I need no help. I control everything around me. I've always controlled everything." The man shook his head gently. "You've been controlling others, yes, but controlling yourself, your desires, your emotions, that is a different kind of power, one that I can help you understand." Seraphina took a step back, her fingers tightening around her cane. She had spent so long hiding behind the mask of power and control, using her beauty and magic to shape the world around her, that the idea of facing her own vulnerabilities was terrifying. The serpent's magic had always filled the emptiness inside her, but now it was becoming clear that the emptiness was not something she could fill with spells alone. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to remain composed. "I've given up everything to gain this power. I've sacrificed parts of myself. And now you're asking me to give up the only thing that has ever kept me from being alone." The man reached out, his touch gentle but firm, as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not asking you to give up your power, Seraphina. I'm asking you to learn to use it in a way that doesn't destroy you. The serpent's magic is not the only force in this world. There is more to life than control and manipulation. There is love, trust, and self-acceptance. Seraphina's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Love? Trust? I've seen the price of those things. I've seen what happens when you let someone into your heart. The man's gaze softened. And yet, you've allowed me in, haven't you? Seraphina froze, her breath caught in her throat. It was true. Despite her best efforts to keep him at a distance, despite the walls she had built around herself, she had allowed him to get closer than anyone ever had. And for the first time, she realized that his presence wasn't just unsettling, it was comforting. The man took a step closer, his voice steady. You don't have to fight this, Seraphina. You don't have to be alone anymore. You can choose a different path, one where you control not only others, but also yourself. For the first time, Seraphina felt the weight of the serpent's power lift slightly, as if the magic that had always defined her was retreating, giving way to something new. She felt a flicker of hope, a spark of possibility she had long buried under layers of manipulation and control. But just as quickly, the serpent's magic surged within her, a warning. The cold, dark power pulsed in her veins, threatening to consume her once again. The familiar rush of power and dominance coursed through her, urging her to reject the man's words, to dismiss his offer of change. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't give up everything I've built, the power, the control. It's all I have left. The man's expression softened with understanding. You don't have to give it up, Seraphina. You just have to find balance. True strength lies not in domination, but in the ability to choose love, to choose freedom, to choose yourself. Seraphina stood there, torn between the man's words and the serpent's pull. The choice before her was impossible, and yet it was the most important one she would ever make. In that moment, she realized that the serpent's magic had never been her true strength. It had only been a crutch, a temporary fix to the emptiness inside her. The real power lay within her ability to choose a different path, a path that would lead her not to destruction, but to something greater. With a deep breath, Seraphina lowered her cane. The serpent's head seemed to retreat, its cold eyes dimming. She turned to face the man, a new resolve in her eyes. I will choose, she said softly. I will choose to take control, not just of others, but of myself. The man smiled, his eyes filled with pride. And that, Seraphina, is the true power you've been seeking all along. And for the first time in years, Seraphina felt the weight of the serpent's magic fade, leaving behind a sense of peace she had never known. The power was still there, but now it was hers to control. Chapter 4. Rebirth of the Serpent. The days that followed were unlike any Seraphina had ever known. The serpent's magic, once a relentless force that had defined every part of her existence, no longer consumed her. She had made the choice. She would no longer use her power to manipulate, to control. Instead, she would learn to wield it with intention, to shape her own destiny, and perhaps even help others find their way. The man, whose name, she had learned, was Alistair, continued to stay by her side, not as a lover or a conqueror, but as a guide. His presence was calming, steadying her whenever the serpent's magic tried to rise up within her, urging her to return to her old ways. His words echoed in her mind. True strength lies not in domination, but in the ability to choose. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the distant hills, Seraphina stood in the small garden outside her cottage. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and the promise of spring. She ran her fingers over the smooth, polished surface of her cane, the serpent's head gleaming softly in the fading light. It had been a symbol of her power, of her control over others, but now it felt different. It felt like a reminder not of who she had been, but of who she was becoming. Alistair approached quietly, his footsteps soft against the earth. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice warm. Seraphina turned to face him, a small smile curving her lips. "I'm still learning," she replied, her voice steady, but filled with a sense of peace she had never known. "But for the first time I feel like I'm in control, not of others, but of myself." Alistair nodded, his eyes full of pride. "You've chosen to embrace your true strength, Seraphina, the power to shape your own life, free from the chains of manipulation and fear." Seraphina glanced down at the serpent-headed cane once more. "It's strange," she said, her voice soft. "For so long I thought this was all I needed. I thought it was the only way to survive, to be powerful. But now I realize that true power isn't in controlling others. It's in being able to control myself." A gentle breeze swept through the garden, ruffling her hair. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the peace that now surrounded her. The serpent's magic still pulsed faintly within her, but it no longer ruled her. She had learned to tame it, to make it work for her instead of against her. "You've freed yourself, Seraphina," Alistair said, stepping closer, "and that is the most powerful magic of all." Seraphina looked up at him, her heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You helped me see that there is more to life than power, that there is more to me than the woman who used magic to bend others to her will." Alistair smiled, his expression soft and understanding. "You've always been more than that, Seraphina. You just had to learn to see it for yourself." The night fell, and the two of them sat in the garden, sharing stories under the stars. For the first time in years, Seraphina felt a sense of belonging, a sense of peace she had never thought possible. She had made her choice, and though the path ahead would not always be easy, she knew that she was no longer alone. In the days that followed, Seraphina began to help those who came to her, not by using her magic to control them, but by guiding them, offering them the strength to make their own choices. She still held the serpent's cane, but now it was a tool, not a weapon. And as she helped others, she began to see something beautiful unfold within herself, a rebirth, a new beginning. No longer the woman who had once used magic to manipulate and destroy, Seraphina had become someone entirely different. She was a woman of strength, of choice, and of compassion. And as she looked to the future, she knew that her journey had only just begun. The serpent, once a symbol of darkness and control, had become a symbol of her rebirth. It no longer represented fear, but transformation. And Seraphina understood in that moment that she had found her true power not in what she could do to others, but in what she had done for herself. And as the stars glittered above, she smiled, knowing that her path was now her own,